When I walked out of that door, I felt my brain break. And a couple things happened all at one time, like bang, 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 immediately. First thing that happened was I discovered what was at the bottom of that tsunami. When you go all the way down to the bottom, it gets really quiet and all the waves go away because there isn't anything left to lose. Right then, I knew what I wanted to do. The plans crystallized in my head. I was either going to go and attack the school or go to the mall. And the only difference in the time of day of that attack would be the time of day I got the gun. Daytime, go to the school. Nighttime, go to the mall. My plan was to go and attack those two places and die by suicide by cop. My name is Aaron Stark, and I was almost a school shooter.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations about our schools. This is your host, Ken Feudernick, and if you've tuned in lately, you've undoubtedly heard our recent episodes with clinical psychologist Haley Watson about student mental health, bullying, and gun violence in schools. Just a day after my first interview with Dr. Watson, Colt Gray, a 14-year-old student in Georgia, killed two classmates and two teachers with an assault rifle. He had apparently been the victim of some intense bullying at school and some serious abuse away from school. Well, today I'm going to be speaking with someone who almost acquired a gun and very nearly used it to kill as many people as he could, either at school or at the local shopping mall. A few years later, he came very close to killing himself. My guest today is Aaron Stark, and I'm eager for all of you to hear his story. There are lessons I think we can all learn, must learn, from his story if we ever hope to reduce the epidemic of gun violence in our schools and communities.
I grew up in a really, really painful and dark life in the early years. The very first memory I have of my entire life, the place where I start my entire existence, I am laying on my bloody mom's body and looking up at my father, and he has a tire iron in his hand, and I'm screaming at him, "You just killed my mom." Now, she wasn't dead, but she was beaten, bloody, and unconscious. And that's the first memory I ever have. So my birth to 5 was living with my father, who is the most violent, depraved person I've ever come in contact with. He hunted me, my mom, and my brother across the country. And when I say hunted, I mean hunted. He would stalk us, and when he would find us, he would attack and rape and beat and just completely destroy our lives. So spent the first 5 years of my life basically in a Stephen King movie. And then when my mom escaped him, she sent me and my brother up to Oregon. My brother's 2 years older than I was. And so she sent us up to Oregon for a year to go live with family while she escaped. That was supposed to be an escape for us too. But the thing is, trauma rolls downhill, and that was the hill my trauma was rolling down from. And so the family that she sent me to was my pedophile rapist uncle and my pedophile rapist great-grandfather, who didn't molest me or my brother, but did molest all the children around and all the generations before. And so we got plopped down right in the middle of all the darkness that was coming for years and years leading up to all this. After a year of that, I moved back to my mom. During the time, she had left my father and got with my stepdad. So I met my stepdad when he was in jail, and he was just leaving a prison for strong arm robbery. They would steal delivery trucks that were going to places and steal everything, and sell it at flea markets. And so it went from living in a Stephen King movie for the first 5 years to basically living in Scarface, where it was crack cocaine and crime and stealing and lying and bouncing from place to place, running from the authorities. We were very nomadic. We would bounce from place to place constantly, going from usually Oregon and Colorado. It was late 80s, early 90s. It was really easy to create an identity of who you were. So you move to Oregon, you make up an identity. I lie about my life, lie about my job history, lie about my rental history. They would get a house, a job. 6 months later, they would lose all that because they're criminal drug addicts. And so they would get evicted, lose their job, move back to Colorado, wash, rinse, repeat. I went to 30 or 40 different schools growing up. I was never at a school longer than 6 months. I was always the new kid. I was always fat and dirty and smelly because I was very unkempt. I wasn't taking care of myself. I adapted really early on, before the age of 7 or 8, that I was the reason this was happening. That something was broken inside of me, and I was the worthless one. My brother he was very utilitarian. He was a mechanical kid. He was the kind of kid that would like take stuff apart, fix things, and take apart your skateboard, that kind of stuff. And so when the crackhead family would break something, my brother was useful. He'd go fix things and he would do stuff around the house. And so when in the morning, there would be times when we'd be getting evicted, where the sheriff would be at our door throwing our stuff into the lawn, into the mud. My parents would be at the bar getting drunk, and my brother is the one that has to find a house to get us where we need to go. And I am the burden that he has to take care of. I'm the thing that he has to find a place to put. So he gets all the responsibility. I get to be the responsibility and it gets to be handled. And my likes and my interests weren't utilitarian at all. I was a book reader. Had my nose buried in mythology textbooks and comic books and complete works of Shakespeare. And I would read every Stephen King novel. I would suck in information like a sponge, but that wasn't useful to a house full of crackheads who were breaking things all the time and getting evicted. So I really internalized that something was wrong with me. You see the things in movies where you go up to the big tough guy and you punch him in the face because you want to establish your pecking orders. You go talk to the big tough guy and smack him. I would kind of do the reverse of that. I would go to the most popular kid in the school and insult myself to him, to kind of put myself down in that pecking order. I know I'm at the bottom. You don't have to beat me down to get me here. I have more fat jokes for me than you do. So I'm going to insult myself more than you can. Mind you, I'm still before 10, 11, 12 years old. This is before I've really even solidified my whole personality. And I'm firmly establishing inside that I am the reason why this all is broken. As my personality is forming, that's what I know I am. I'm the broken, nasty one. I'm the monster. The violence at home continues. The violence in school continues. It all just keeps on escalating and escalating. And I've described my life back then like I was living in a tsunami, like just sloshing back and forth. And just waves of destruction would come by and just take out everything that I had. And I had no control over it. It was multiple times in my life where someone would burst into my bedroom at 3 o'clock in the morning with a duffel bag and throw it at me, say, "We have 5 minutes to get it, grab all your stuff. We need to get out of here." And so I would grab everything I could, which was the only thing that I would ever take was my comic books. So nothing in my life had any kind of permanence and nothing had any kind of solidness to it. Not even my parents' authority. When they would try to punish me, they would do things like threaten to do the absolute worst. They would threaten me with the absolute worst punishment. I'm going to beat you bloody. I'm going to break your neck. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kick you out. You're never going to come back to this house. And then 5 minutes later, they would act like nothing was wrong. And they would never follow through on any punishment. They would just threaten the worst, but they would never actually do anything. And then 5 minutes later, they'd come to me and be all buddy. I left home when I was 14 years old because I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the drugs and the fighting and the violence and the constant chaos and the constant degradation. And so I ran away. I had a friend, in quotes, that I was going to school with, who his dad bought all the food at the house and his dad paid the rent at the house, but his dad didn't live there. His dad lived with the dad's girlfriend. So it ended up just being a teenage flop house. It was my friend and his little brother and us and just a bunch of teenagers living in this house. So it turned into this party house for a while. I call it my disaster groupies. These were people who kind of didn't have anything like me in their world. They didn't have anything to the extreme that I was. There was maybe one or two other kids on a similar level because it was a bunch of depressed kids gravitating together. But they didn't really have anything else like me in there. So they would push me as far off the edge as I could go. How far can we push you? How dark can we go? So instead of sitting around talking about girls or sports or movies, we talk about killing people. So if you're going to shoot up the school, what would you do? If you're going to kill 10 people, how would you do it? And it just kind of became the fiction of the group. And it didn't start there because depression never starts there. It gravitated there. The darkness got more and more dark as the time goes on. But that was also just kind of the fiction of the time. There was a lot of angry media all around, and we were a bunch of depressed kids navigating depression without any adult supervision. This is an important spot to bring in the only good portion of my life that I had around this time. It's this kid that I met named Mike. Okay. So I met Mike when I was 12 and he was 10. And we met at a comic book shop and out nearby one of the many houses that I was living in. And he actually lived at the opposite end of the block. So we met at the comic book shop. We bonded immediately over deep conversation and superheroes. And I went to his house and pretty much never left. Like I went there, I was there all the time, spend weeks there, and he turned into my home base. So whenever we were bouncing back and forth between Oregon and Colorado, he never moved. He had the total polar opposite life that I had. He had a very well-to-do family, lived in this big 4-story house that was he'd do things like write a Christmas list and get the things on his Christmas list, which just blew my mind. Like that was an amazing, how could you even imagine doing that? He ended up being kind of like my home base. So whenever I was in Denver, I knew that I could call him up and I would have a place to be for a little while. So as I'm spinning out in this depression and we're still bouncing back and forth and I'm gathering this disaster group friend group for the time that I'm in Denver, for a little while, there was like this 3 lives that I'm living. The home life, my family, I am a worthless piece of crap. I am a nothing. I'm the one that you get step on. I'm the one that gets crushed in the corner. I don't even belong there. I get laughed at. My own hurt gets laughed at. Then in most of my friend group, I have this weird disaster groupie friend group where I'm an evil unicorn, where it turns my pain into a party favor, where I start talking about the hell that I'm living in and it makes everybody laugh and have a good time. And then I go over to Mike's house for a couple hours a day. And then for just a little bit of time, I'm valued. But that gets attacked by my own toxicity, because as I'm getting more and more degradation from all the other sources, my own toxicity grows in both outward and inward. I start getting negative. I start insulting more. I start being really offensive to everybody. And I start smelling really bad and getting really filthy because I'm not taking care of myself at all. I don't have clean clothes ever. I never take a shower. And I go from spending a week at Mike's house to a couple days at Mike's house. So by the end, I can't spend more than a couple hours, because if I'm sitting on his couch and when I stand up, his mom has to scrub the stain off the spot. And so now I'm leaving residue. And that just compounds that I'm the dirty, nasty one. I'm the worthless one. And the disaster group friend group ends in a big explosion where we have this big party. One of the kids has a birthday, and so we have a party, and there's like 15 kids party, and I go to the day job that I have, and my boss happens to be an LSD dealer, and I buy a bunch of LSD from him, and we have a bunch of kids tripping acid. So there's like 12, 13 kids tripping acid, another 14 kids having a birthday party with this band, because one of the kids is a high school kid, so they had a band playing, and all this stuff. Right in the middle of all that, parents arrive. Okay, parents show up. Everybody's doing drugs. Everybody's having a party. Party's over. Everybody goes home. House is done. Everybody gets kicked out of the house. Nobody gets to stay there anymore. They all get to go to their homes and go to their families. I don't have anywhere else to be. The only places I have left to be are this field that's behind the restaurant Casa Bonita here in Denver, which is a big pink Mexican restaurant. But behind that, there was a field. And in the field, there was a little dip. And if you lay in the dip, they couldn't see you from the street. So it was either that field that I could stay in, or the place that I really actually ended up, which was Mike's tool shed, because back behind Mike's house, they had a tool shed, and there they were storing a lazy boy chair and a big puffy recliner chair. The roof and the tool shed had wood slats in it. You could see the stars through the thing. So I would go there occasionally, and if I didn't have anywhere else to be, if the weather was too bad, I could go to that, and Mike would sometimes sneak me down dinner. And so after being homeless for a while and bouncing between those two places, I'm in Mike's tool shed, and it is the middle of the night. And I'm cutting myself so bad because on this time I had started self-harming, first as a self-regulatory issue, but then it quickly escalated to more serious self-harm, deeper cuts. And I'm cutting myself so bad in his tool shed that a pool of blood's forming on the ground underneath me. And I think to myself, if I don't get some help, I'm going to die. I need to do something or I'm going to die. So when dawn comes, I knock on Mike's back door. And I asked for a phone book and call social services on myself. It was dawn when I called, and it was about 3 or 4 in the afternoon when I got there. And they had not just called me in, they called my mom in too. Now, my mom was one of the biggest abusers of my entire life. She would do things like laugh at me when I was cutting. When I started cutting myself, it was a pretty serious thing. First, it was just light cuts. And it was just minor scratches, as kind of like to calm those waves. It kind of calmed that tsunami down. But as it escalated and as the cuts got deeper and as the self-degradation got worse, the self-harm got worse. And my mom's response was ridicule. She would laugh at me. And so there was a time when I was sitting up in my bedroom and she walked past me laughing as I was sitting, as she saw my bed cutting myself in my arms. And she literally laughed as she walked past. She said, "Oh, you just doing that again? Whatever." And my response was to follow her down the stairs and slice into my arm as deeply as I can, and screaming, "Do you think this is a joke?" And her response to that was nothing. She stood there and just stared at me. So I went upstairs, wrapped a t-shirt on my arm, sat down and played video games. She never came and check on me. Never came to check on me the next day. When we sit down at this table for these counselors, on one end they have 4 or 5 counselors. On the other end, there's me and my mom. And they say, "What are we here for? What's the problem?" And I produce a bloody razor blade, box cutter style razor blade, throw it on the table. So that's my part of the problem. It's got freshly covered in blood. I've shown my arms, fresh cuts on them. So I feel like I'm at the bottom. I feel like I'm worthless. I feel like there's nothing for me. Now, my mom, who was the most practiced liar I've ever known, got them to believe that I was just making it all up. I was just doing it for attention, that I just was doing it to get a rise out of people. And they sent me home with her. And we got a couple blocks away from the place. And she turns to me with this evil look on her face. And she says, "Next time you should do a better job and I'll buy you the razor blades." And I'm like, "Okay, you think I'm a monster? I'll show you what a monster is now." And instead of wrapping that darkness around me like a blanket, from then on, I just dove headlong into it. I'll show you what it's like to be dark. And so for the next 9 months, I went on what I call scorched earth, where I was trying to consciously destroy every bit of good that was in my life. I was trying to burn it down. If you liked me, I was going to offend you. And I was going to pick the way that offended you the most. So I was saying racist and sexist and just the most disgusting things, not because I agree with them, not because I was racist or sexist, just because I was trying to offend you. Whatever it was that made you the most upset, that's exactly what I was going to do. And in that, I went to Mike's house, stole a bunch of his comic books and went and sold them at a comic shop because I was trying to destroy my life. After 9 months of that, 9 months of solid social destruction, in which time I also went and charmed my way into every family member that I could, got into all their photo albums and gathered every picture of myself and put them in a pile and burned them. I was trying to annihilate my past. And so after 9 months of that solid social destruction, I was alone. And I was in that field behind Casa Bonita. And I had been there for over a month. And I was surviving by stealing free samples and stealing food out of the dumpster from the grocery store at the top of the hill and avoiding the police during school hours because I had to be on school campus. Otherwise, I'd get arrested for truancy. I hadn't changed my clothes in over a month. I hadn't taken my shoes off in weeks, but I wasn't wearing socks. My feet were just rotting off of my body. And I woke up in the snow. I woke up in like 3 inches of snow. And the 2-block walk to go from the park that I was sleeping in to the top of the hill to the Albertsons, I wasn't just shaking, I was seizing. I was shaking so bad I couldn't barely breathe. I was, "Oh my God, I can't do it." And I finally get up to the bathroom and I stand there and I'm washing my face off. And I think I'm going to die. If I don't do something, I'm going to die. And across the street from the school that I was nominally at, which was North High here in Denver, there was a building that said mental health. Now, I didn't know what it was for, but I knew the sign said mental health. And I knew the last time I warned them that my mom was coming. So I'm not going to do that again. And so I go in there and they have me see this young woman. I don't really remember much about that conversation. All I remember is the end when she told me, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I can't help you." And when I walked out of that door, I felt my brain break. I felt like snap like a mirror. And a couple things happened all at one time, like bang, 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 immediately. First thing that happened was I discovered was the bottom of that tsunami. When you go all the way down to the bottom, it gets really quiet and all the waves go away because there isn't anything left to lose. You're going to shoot me? Cool, I'm going to die. You're going to put me in jail? All right, they're going to feed me. Like I don't have any more down. And right then I knew what I wanted to do. I knew the plans crystallized in my head. I had talked it through with those disaster groupie friends. I was either going to go and attack the school and go into the school food court or go to the mall and go to the mall food court. And the only difference in the time of day of that attack would be the time of day I got the gun. Daytime, go to the school. Nighttime, go to the mall. And neither one of those places were soft targets. There were uniformed, armed police officers stationed in the school at all times. And there was a police station a couple doors down from the food court at the mall. My plan was to go and attack those two places and die by suicide by cop. And I knew where to get a gun because there was ROTC next to the RTC building. There was a bunch of gangbangers at the high school, and they bought and sold drugs from my family. And they would flash guns all the time because this was mid 90s Boys in the Hood era. They would bring in pistols and stuff. And this was before the age of metal detectors. So they would constantly be flashing guns. And they knew that I wasn't a narc. They would buy and sell weed constantly from my parents. And so they were like, I went to them like, hey, can you get me a gun? Hopefully one that shoots a lot of bullets. The guy's like, yeah, sure. Get me an ounce of weed. Now that was the easy part. I just went to my mom's house, took an ounce out of my brother's buddy's pocket off the floor, had it all bagged up, ready to sell, took it to the guy. I'm like, here you go. I was like, all right, dude, give me 3 days. I'll get that for you. So I was set. In 3 days' time, I was going to go cause the attack. But in that 3 day time, something happened in my head. Looking back, I think I was saying goodbye. I was going to people in a much more calm way and like giving away all my comic books and saying thank you to my ex-girlfriend for letting me sleep in the gravel outside her window, and just closing out friendships in a much more positive way than the 9 months previous. Like all of a sudden, peace had come over for some reason. And in that time, I went to Mike's house. And when I knocked on Mike's door, I broke into tears. And when he opened it, he took me inside. And he never asked me why I was there. Mike knew intimately the hell that I was living. Mike saw the cuts on my arms. It was his bedroom that I would sit and cry, talking about what happened at my house. The night of my 16th birthday, I showed up at Mike's house after my mom had beaten me bloody and ripped the clothes off of my body and kicked me out on the night of my 16th birthday in the rain. Kicked me out. And I would go down to walk down to Mike's house. I sit at his kitchen table, bloody, bruised, shirt torn. And his mom walks past and says, hey, what's that? What's up with Aaron? And he says, it's his 16th birthday today. And his mom kicked him out. So his mom comes and gets me a brownie with a big red table candle and sticks the table candle in the middle of it and gave it to me. And that was my 16th birthday party, sitting at Mike's table. So Mike knew intimately the hell that I was living in, but he didn't inquire. He didn't ask. He just brought me in, sat me down, gave me some food, and he kept on telling me, you're a good kid in a crap world. For me, it was profound. It wasn't hanging out with a friend that did it for me. It wasn't that I sat with a buddy. It's that when I knocked on Mike's door, I wasn't a person. I was just a walking ball of nothing ready to explode. I was not there to hang out with a friend. I was there to say goodbye and say thank you for being there in my life, but I'm done now. And to walk away. And I was not there to continue anything. I was there to end things. What Mike did was, it wasn't hanging out with a friend and eating a dinner and watching a movie. It was that he put the tiny bits of humanity on the bottom shelf of my life when I had fallen completely off the cliff. It wasn't sitting down having a meal. It was, oh, I can like food. Like, I can enjoy something. Like, it's as base as that. Like, I can like. And that was profound. That absolutely, it was like rolling the waves back. It was like setting my feet on the ground and taking a breath. Being treated like a person when you feel absolutely inhuman can change your entire life. And it did to me. I had hated myself so much that I wanted the whole world to agree with me. And Mike was there to tell me that I was just a person in pain. And it was absolutely profound. And I didn't leave Mike's house for a week. I never went and got the gun. And he's still my best friend to this day. But it's not like a light switch flipped. It's not like, ding, everything's better. You know, I sat with a friend and everything's happy. Everything's great. You know, all the hell, that's going to be wiped away because I had a night with a friend and everything's perfect. No. That's not it at all. It was that when I was able to set my feet on the ground for the first time in years and take a breath and be a human. And that was profound. And what Mike really did for me at that point was give me a frame shift. He gave me just enough of a frame shift to like stay at a friend's house for a little while so I could have just enough stability to kind of reestablish my humanity. And kind of those waves that I was sloshing around in, those turbulent waves of the tsunami, those were able to recede. And almost immediately, I got remorseful and ashamed of what I had planned. But the hell at home was still the same. The chaos of the family was still the same. All the drugs and stuff, the violence was still the same. Yeah, but I internally was able to have a reset. Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit because that was the night between my 16th and 17th birthday. Okay. Now I'm going to fast forward slightly to the night of my 19th birthday. The night of my 19th birthday, I'm planning on committing suicide. And I'm doing that because that depression had spun up again. All that hellish home, like I said, that hadn't changed. But now, instead of being outward directed, it was inward directed. I was just tired of being the burden, tired of being the cast off, tired of being the nothing. I wanted to just erase myself and be done. And I just wanted to be over. But I wanted to live as normal a day as possible because I had had people intervene in the past. I wanted to act like as regular as far as I possibly could. So I went to Mike's house. Now, my choice of suicide was going to be overdose. I had bought some LSD off the streets. I had stolen a bottle of pills from my mom and stole a big bag of cocaine from my mom. I had copious amounts of narcotics. I had way more drugs than were needed for the job. And I went to Mike's house. Now, Mike, he has a social circle of a bunch of friends, and one of his friends was this girl named Amber. Now, they weren't dating or anything. They were just friends, but they were good buddies. And we would go over there and watch movies and listen to music and stuff and go have a good time. But she was his friend. She was his contact, but she was always really nice to me. So we went over to Amber's house. He's like, hey, we're going to go kick it at Amber's house today. I'm like, okay, cool. Right on. That's a great last day. I'm going to spend it with two of my favorite people and go to that field and end my life. But in the day, you can't think of better company. So I go. And we get there. And that wasn't it at all, actually. I walked into a surprise birthday party for me. I walked into about 14 people singing happy birthday, and Amber had baked a blueberry peach pie, and I walked past him and dropped all my drugs in the toilet, and that's the last time I ever tried to kill myself. And you know what's really beautiful for me about that story, that I didn't even find out till years later, is that when we left Mike's house, there was no party waiting for me. When we left Mike's house, he just called ahead and said, hey, I got Aaron in the car and it's his birthday today. And Amber had a bunch of friends over already. They had already baked a pie, but they were a bunch of artist friends. So they threw together a bunch of decorations really quick in about 5 minutes time and threw up this party decorations for me. So I walked in to a fundamentally life-changing experience that altered me to the very core of my existence that my friend put up in about 5 minutes because her buddy was having a birthday. So you never know the simple acts of humanity and kindness that you can do that can change someone's whole world. Maybe that act of kindness could be the only thing they've ever had of that kind of love. If you see someone that's in that spot that needs that kind of love, give it to them. Give love to the ones that you think deserve it the least because they need it the most. That's my story.
Aaron, thank you for sharing that story. I'm trying to figure out how to catch my breath here. I'm so moved. I have so many emotions that I'm trying to sort out myself in hearing this story. I've got a few questions I would love you to think about. And first of all, just thank you for sharing that story and for being available to people, myself and listeners. And I know you've told this story, TED Talks with millions of people have heard it, but I just want to thank you for the courage you've had and you have in sharing this unbelievably painful story that I think most people in the world just don't realize. I mentioned this 14-year-old kid in Georgia who probably had a similar story, been moving around a lot.
Yeah, it really looked like me. To me, it looked like that was my life with the other ending, watching that story. The kid bounced around constantly, had a drug-addicted family, a really oppressive drug addict parents who evidently didn't care so much about him at all, and was even so new to the school that all of his school records hadn't even been moved over. Like he was still in that nothing phase where nobody even knew who he was. And I can understand it. None of this is to say that it excuses any of the tragedy that happened. I talk about this to try to illustrate that path that we go down on the dark side to maybe try to help kids off of it. Because now I'm a father of four. Have a beautiful wife. I have a great life. I do everything I can to try to help everybody else not go down the same path I did. And just because you did live a horrible life doesn't mean you have to continue to live a horrible life. And I've always say that there is a very small group of people who will actually pull the trigger on an attack. Very, very small group. I know the number seems huge, but it's still a very, very small number of people that will actually pull the trigger on the attack. But there is a gigantic number in the gray area that think that they could, should, or might commit those attacks. And those are the ones that we can reach. And I think that we can do it by reminding them they matter.
Aaron, I have to believe that in the time you spent talking with various groups, I know you've talked with law enforcement, the FBI, educators, and I have to believe that somewhere along the line, someone has come up to you and said, I am where you were. I'm curious to know, what do they say? What do you say in response to them?
For the ones who are still walking down that dark path, what I tell them is keep walking, that you will make it through it, that there is in fact light as long as you keep going. Just don't give up. Don't let the darkness win. That remember that depression's a lying bastard. That depression will lie to you. Depression will tell you things. And that self-hatred is also a liar. And that you, in fact, can make it. From all the many thousands of messages that I've received, the common thing that I've seen is there isn't any difference in the pain. Because the messages I received weren't just, hey, that was cool. It was, hey, that was cool. And here's my diary. And here's all the pain I ever went through. And here's all the things I ever experienced of how I shared that same darkness. And there isn't any difference in the pain. There's no difference in the pain that I was feeling when I was at my absolute worst, when I was about to shoot up a school, and what a model feels when she's sitting in her car throwing up in a cup, and what a gangbanger feels when he's sitting out having to go into the store to rob it to fit into his clique, and what the kid in Afghanistan feels when he can't even talk about his abuse because their friends are going to kill him. And what the kid in the military feels when he can't talk about his abuse because his buddies are going to kill him. There isn't any difference in that pain. The reality of it is there's something at the bottom of it is I'm not good enough in me, and I feel like I need to break myself apart to fit my own world. One of the things that really gives me hope is the commonality of goals between the various levels of the helpers and what they're looking for in this. And when I go and speak to the federal agencies, and I go and speak to the counseling offices, and then I go speak to local law enforcement, then I go speak to a local school district, and you would think they might be looking for different things. Like I was an almost school shooter. We just heard the story. So different people might want different things out of that story. You might think law enforcement might want to hear about details of a crime and how you might acquire a gun, things like that. All of that's not the truth. The reality of the fact is they all want the same thing. Every one of those levels wants to figure out, how do I connect on a human level with that kid in the dark who's hating himself, to remind him that he's good and he can matter. And if we can figure out that equation, if all of those different levels are looking for that same equation to go to try to move forward, then that's the one thing that's stopping them each from moving forward in their individual respective areas, because they each have individualistic goals based off of that. But that's what they want. They want to find out, how do I touch people organically? How do I reach someone on a human level and see that you matter to me and I matter to you, and we are together in this experience? That gives me a lot of hope.
And that's what Mike did for you. And what I picked up from what you were saying about what Mike did was he wasn't trying to make you a project. He wasn't trying to say, you need help and I'm going to find it. He said, you're a good person and with a crap life, something to that effect. Talk a little bit about what it was that he did that prevented you from killing a lot of people. And then a couple of years later, did something that sort of almost by good fortune prevented you from killing yourself.
Well, if you ask him what he did, it was just that he did what a friend's supposed to do. He just did what a friend's supposed to do. But the way that I see what he did is he was the island of normal that withstood my storm and never broke in my ocean of chaos. He never broke, because there's a test that you go through. There's a test that if you're in the dark, if you're the kid like I was, and you encounter people who are saying they're going to help you or who are trying to help you, there's a couple different various equations that go through your head. First off, it's important to note that it's equally depersonalizing to be a project as it is to be a monster. That is, neither one of those are people. Both of those are objects, and you're obviously more ahead of me. You're above me if I'm a project and you're fixing me. That means I'm beneath you. That we are not equals. Okay, so it's equally depersonalizing to be afraid of me as it is to fix me. So what Mike did was meet me on an organic level in the middle and say, no, you matter to me on a person. I see you. You're a person that matters. You're a person in pain. I respect you as a human. He always respected my deep thought and my intellectualism, the fact that I was as loyal as could possibly be. I'll give you the skin off my back if I have to. Like, I will fight through the fire for you because I never had anybody fight for me. So I would do it for you. And Mike was always that consistent person. And he withstood my tests, because the equations that you go through are really important as someone who is in the dark, because you know you're not invisible all the way. And that's why it's really important, in my opinion, to reach those kids in that deformative age and remind them that they matter and that they can do this and they can exist to make it through it. Because the opponent that we're facing is the negative social economy. The opponent we're facing is the negative social world that's going to tell them that kindness is a bad thing and that being mean is a good thing. And so these kids who are seeking at the very heart of it to be told that you matter and you can exist and you can be good and you're doing all right. That kid who's sitting like I was in a hellish existence with crackhead parents trying to figure out who he can exist, who he can live with, and how he can finally find something that matters in his world. He's going to find it from one telling him, well, you can do that. But to do that, those people have to pay for it. And you have to insult all these people over here. And we see it every day in our social media. And so if we don't have an attitude to look at these kids with respect, they will find the respect somewhere.
How do we flip this story around so that educators who are thinking, gosh, I think I've had kids like you in my class, and I didn't really know what to do. I don't know what to do. How do we flip the script in a way that where kids are not incentivized to be cruel, but rather to be kind? How do we get educators to help kids flip that around so that they see that as an opportunity, like Mike did, to reach out and say, you know what, maybe I'm going to reach out to an Aaron and offer to be his friend?
See, I'm a fan of the engagement with the kids about their own likes. One of the things celebrating humanity, celebrating the humanity of the kids. A suggestion that I have is, like, if you're in the classroom and you're trying to think of an activity, have like a hobby day. Have a day where you come in and be like, okay, cool. For half an hour, we're going to talk about what this person likes. We're going to show us what you like. And you could say, like, okay, no video games, no music, nothing in pop culture. So you can keep it scaled down into the obscure likes, because the obscure likes where everything really shines. That's where the real fun happens. Tell me the things that you like that no one else really pays attention to, because that's where the real cool things are. That's when you end up with kids who might find engagement with something that either they didn't know they liked, or now they see someone that shares a like that they had. That could be one way. Like, engage with that. One of the more profound things that I've found, though, in every audience that I've spoken to, every single one, there is at least 5 or 6 of me in the audience, and everybody knows at least 10 to 15 of me. I am not special. I am not special. The only thing special about my life is that I talk about it. There are people who have lived much worse existences than I have, who have gone through many worse things. There are stories that will curdle your blood. But these people have also made it out. The difficult part comes in talking about it, because there comes a stigma both internally and externally from reaching these kind of topics and being able to discuss it openly. The one thing that I really hope the most are people that hear my story, when next time they see a kid or encounter a kid that has a similar story, instead of just seeing it as a mental health problem, which is a big gray amorphous cloud that you can't really wrap your hands around and can't really understand because it's too personal, so you can't really penetrate it. So it's just this mental health. Maybe you'll see my face, and maybe you'll hear my story, and maybe you'll see the steps that I went down and how I managed to get out with just simple human compassion. but someone just treating me like I was a person that needed to be helped out of pain, not out of a project, just out of simple human kindness, that all I needed was love. That we used to sing songs about that. Love is all we need. And I really think that that's the truth. For those of you listening, just give love to the ones that you think deserve it the least because they need it the most.